Industry insider Mark Friedlander says that our insurance here in Florida is on a trajectory towards imminent collapse. Potentially the most dangerous force to the entire Florida housing market is property insurance. Of all the grand news of how resilient Florida has been through this housing correction, it's definitely been standing tall in terms of housing values, but there's another story happening, and that is the challenge in not only obtaining insurance, but in some cases keeping insurance and being able to afford it, as some people are seeing their premiums double and triple. Here's where the problem really becomes bad. Insurance being tough to attain is a game stopper when you're talking about trading houses, and here's why. 65 to as much as 85% of all the homes transacted transition from one person to the next in the Central Florida marketplace is purchased by a bank loan. If you cannot obtain property insurance, you are going to have a failed sale. There's so many hurdles now, particularly in Florida, that I've noticed even in the comments of some of my most recent videos that a lot of you are really starting to wonder, how bad is it? Today, we're gonna dig into this serious issue. I'm gonna walk through the exact details of exactly why it's happening. And a hint, it's not just from hurricanes. And we're gonna talk about how it's affecting people right now and what you can do about it. But first, I wanna ensure as many people, see what I did there? Do me a favor, scroll down real fast, smash that like button. All of this has started over years of compounding problems. All right, folks, this is a common headline right here. This is a Fox 4 out of Jacksonville. Despite focus from lawmakers, insurance prices keep rising. They show here in the middle of the article. In fact, this week, Citizen Property Insurance, the state-run insurer for last resort, announced this week that it plans an average 14% rate increase. Other insurance companies have announced plans for rate increases anywhere from 40 to 60%. Now, folks, I've read articles most recently that the average cost to insure a home in Florida is around $4,400, okay? So it's over $4,000 on average annually to cover your house, protect it. And the reality, as I mentioned in the opener, is you can't own a house without there being an insurance policy on it if you have a lender involved, okay? Now, even if you don't have a lender involved, most people are gonna buy insurance because if it burns down, they want replacement. But the reality is, all kinds of stories are popping up around the state where people are saying, my insurance company for years just non-renewed me. Or my policy has jumped 200-300% in as little as 4 years. Now, you're seeing this happen even far away in areas that are far away from storm risk. For instance, like Orange County, Florida, where I'm at in the middle of Orlando, high cost, even though it's nowhere near landfall of a hurricane, okay? We are not prone to massive hurricane damage. So as you see all these reports, you say to yourself, what exactly is going on? Well, let's take a look at all the players involved. Let's enter in not just the insurance companies, because it's easy for most people to say, isn't the insurance company the problem? I bet these insurance companies are lobbying Florida. Well, that's actually not true. The insurance companies have actually lost billions in insuring Florida and have left the state. But the reality is we have a couple other players that you have to talk about if you're going to address this problem correctly. So here we go. In the state of Florida, we obviously know it's not hurricane. So you might be outside of Florida watching this. We've not had a really heavy volume of storms in the past since 2016. We had a decent sized storm in 17 and 18 between Irma and Michael. But then after that, the past 3 years or so, nothing substantive. However, Florida is the state with nearly 80% of all property insurance lawsuits are filed in our state. And by the way, when I tell you that we have over $4,000 a year in property insurance cost for us to insure a home, the average in the other states is around $1,500 a month. It's not just storm damage, folks. Listen, in Florida, on a given year, we'll have as many as 115,000 lawsuits for property insurance issues. The highest other state in the union has 900. You know, imagine if there was no state of Florida and there was just the 49 remaining states. Which state do you think besides Florida would have the most property insurance lawsuits in its border? California. You say California, you just come up and say, that's obvious. Get this, folks. Florida has 27 times the amount of lawsuit activity in this arena than California does. The reason why? It's very loose on how attorneys can actually approach lawsuits, how much they can bill, and how they can do business. Now, as a result, it is the wild, wild east, if you will. It is Crazy. And as a result, you have billions and billions of dollars being brought out of the insurance company's pockets, going into the attorney's pockets. And a lot of, I mean, a huge share of that isn't even going to the insured person at the end of the day. So it's gobbled up in legal expense and legal fees, and basically the attorneys teams are larger than ever. Okay, but let's take a look at this. Look at the data. Okay, according to Florida's Office of Insurance Regulation, this is a state office, reported 51 billion, again, I'm right here in the middle of this paragraph, was paid out by Florida insurers over a 10-year period. 71% of 51 billion went to attorneys fees and public adjusters. Okay, so the cumulative, now here's the outcome, folks. Where did the insurance companies go? Why is it so expensive? 2020 and 2021, the cumulative net underwriting loss, that means the cost of doing business for an insurance company, was a negative $1 billion each year for 20 and 21. If you go online and you read in the forums, okay, because I got to tell you, folks, it's not just the attorneys, okay? There's also a major fraud issue, okay? So besides frivolous lawsuits amounts to Floridians paying, literally, folks, it's like you might as well cut a check to your local attorney's office and their teams and their ability to function. Because when we're paying our yearly premiums, we are underwriting massive amounts of legal fees until Florida, we see the headlines, they say, the Florida lawmakers are putting their heads together. It's like, come on, folks. We know the data shows frivolous lawsuits are running up insurance costs. We know it, okay? The reality is, if that's the case, we got to do something about it. And honestly, I thought the tort reform part would really be on the red side of the management equation here. And yet it seems like we're just figuring it out. We're trying to figure it out how to manage, and bring about tort reform in the state of Florida. And again, like Ron DeSantis, for as popular as he's been for Florida, this is a big time situation for him to leave open. And the funny thing is, a lot of folks, when they're in Florida, they're relegated to citizens insurance, right? Citizens insurance. I love it. I get these questions when I'm selling houses in Florida. The buyer will call me and say, Jared, I just got my policy quote on this house we're about to close on, and it's like $3,500. And it's with Citizens. I need to shop it. And I'm like, well, good luck. I can tell you who to shop it by. They'll say, who? And I'll say, Citizens, because that's the only other option you got. I mean, they're a de facto monopoly. The funny thing is, until I was actually studying for and reviewing data on this video, I didn't know Citizens is actually a state-backed public insurance for Florida. That's got to make you feel confident, right? I mean, we are literally, the last leg standing is public option in Florida for insurance. Here we go, folks. That's what we have left. You have no insurance. We know if you don't have a competition, the marketplace disappears, then the consumer will suffer, and that's where we are. But let's go to fraud, because fraud is also a massive, massive issue in this situation. According to data published by FIU here out of Florida, the single biggest reason for the fraud that we're seeing is called the assignment of benefits problem involving contractors. It's partly fraud and partly taking advantage of loose regulation and court decisions that have affected insurance companies. Now, let me tell you about this particular situation and how it works and how you can avoid it, because it is big. And I had this happen and unfold right in front of me, and it had nothing to do with a storm or hurricane or anything else. This assignment of benefits can happen on anything. If a vendor floods your house, you can get looped in this. This is how it works. So I had a plumber remodeling one of my homes. So they came out, we were putting in-wall faucets in, okay? And what that means is the faucet's going to come directly out of the wall instead of actually sitting, on top of the vessel coming out of the top of the sink. It's just a beautiful setup. The faucet comes out right from the wall, and the fixture is against the wall, basically. But the wall's open, and the plumber was working in the wall with active water on. So he's about to work on pipes, cut pipes, remove pipes. He's leaning on a pipe, and it burst while my water was open on the main to that room. Floods my house. Within 24 hours, the same company, a large Orlando plumber, sends a drying crew out with expensive machines to dry my house out efficiently. They come out before the drying crew is on the way, okay? A trained representative from the company, I mean, they were to a science on how to manage this, comes to me with a clipboard and says, sign this so we can get started. Now, I look at it, and what the form said is, look, you're going to file an insurance claim, Mr. Jones, to your insurance company. Whatever the bills are that we can accumulate and prove that need to be paid, those will be paid, but the checks will usually go to you, the owner, but you're going to assign all of them to us. That means if I can go and find my flooring replacement cheaper, I can go and find my cabinets cheaper. If I can find the cost at a lower price, then the checks paid to the vendor aren't going to be so hefty. Well, what they would do is they would line all this up. A lot of cases, they would wire in the adjuster who comes and actually looks at the house, and they go, wow, this $10,000 cost to mitigate, we're going to send a bill to the insurance company and demand for 30 grand. And then they've already signed that the customer has to turn all the money into them. So they inflate the numbers to the max. And again, this is just one factor. The other thing that you have happening in Florida that's also fraud is you would have a massive roofing schemes. So basically, you'd have people who live on the same street, right? Let's say everybody on the street lived there for 2 years. They've paid $1,500 a year to their insurance company for 2 years. So 2 years in, they've paid 3 grand into the insurance company. What happens is if a typical afternoon storm, which we have in Florida, comes through the area, which they often do every day at 4 o'clock, like clockwork in the summertime, if there's hail in that storm, like, golf ball size or something of that nature that's interesting, the roofers knew, and I've heard this, that they actually really kind of watch radar. They know when there's meteorological events, they have history on them. So they could go back and if they find hail on your roof, they can, coach the owner like, hey, you need to tell the insurance company that this happened around this date because we know there was a hailstorm that day. So they would basically create the circumstance because they knew the loopholes. They knew, hey, if you have hail, the insurance will cover all this cost. So you have people commenting, on the public forums on these types of news articles where people were saying, hey, thanks to my neighbor who was cheering the other day because he came to my house and said, after that storm, I had 2 loose shingles and I got the insurance company to replace my entire roof for $18,000. And what? You paid into your insurance company for 2 years back to back? So this is what happens. Now, scale that all the way up, street after street, all across the country. And the way insurance works, insurance is priced on risk, right? So the chances that there's going to be loss by the insurance company, they're going to price specific areas of Florida based on the risk of loss. So if you live on the coast line, right, you're right near Homestead, Florida, that got decimated by Hurricane Andrew 18 years ago. Or you live on the Gulf side where there's been constant hurricanes really going up the Gulf near Tampa, then you're going to have a higher cost, or theoretically you should, than someone, for instance, in the middle of the state who has no chance of actually having serious, storm issues. Like, middle of Orlando, we might have a tree fall over. That's going to be the biggest thing you have to fear, even in a hurricane making landfall in our state. But the reality is, even in the state's middle parts, inland, you have high cost because of all the inland. The inland suffers from the lawsuits, the fraud, and everything else. Now, as a result, here's the reality, folks. This is a situation where you have no insurance competition now left in our state. None, okay? Now, we also hope, hey, Citizens has got it under control, right? They're collecting hundreds of billions of dollars a year because now they're the only game in town. And we're all trusting that that is a well-managed situation. It's going to be fine for years to come. But the reality is the state of Florida, those that represent us, you have to let them know that if we do not stop frivolous lawsuits, we're done. Like, we're done. And there's an entire food chain around that industry. You drive around any street in the city and you see, and I'll change names so that's to protect those involved. You see, like, Dan Foolin got me $1.5 million. Give him a call. He'll help you too. Let this guy deal with the insurance companies. There's a very, very big one on, and every time you hear him talk, oh, I'll make the insurance companies pay. You really need to understand, he's saying, I'm going to make all of you pay. I'm going to make all of you pay. And we have the winners. The winners are these firms. The winners are the contractors that know the game, the roofers. Unbelievable, folks. Try calling a roofer to do a cash job that doesn't have anything to do with insurance. Won't happen. Like if you have a cash roof repair, and I'm talking not a $500 job, a $3,000 job in cash, they won't show up. You can't get one. You call 20 of them to get one because they only care about a fix on an insurance company for the most part. And I'm not hammering all attorneys, I'm not hammering all roofers. The day comes when you need them legitimately, and thank goodness they're there. But the reality is, right as it stands, unless our state gets very serious about addressing all of these issues, particularly closing loopholes to frivolous lawsuits, closing loopholes that allow for contractor fraud, then we are going to be in serious, serious trouble. And I look at the situation in Tallahassee and I'm like, how do we not have a blueprint to work off of, right? It's the red hand side running the show, right? Like this should be in their element. And it's interesting. It's almost you know that where people's bread is buttered, right? Politicians only care about getting reelected. And you don't get reelected without cash. And we know that the players involved, the advertisers, the attorneys, they take care of these people. They court. Everybody is in the stream, right, of the flow of the cash. So the insurance pays out, all those parties collect, and everybody gets a piece of the action, even those that are being reelected, on those insurance dollars that we're all paying into. It's a network of cash flow that we've all adopted into, and it has to be disrupted, folks. It has to be disrupted.